Greetings, adventurers. You're listening to The Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood with me, Professor Atwood. I'm glad you're here, and I can't wait to tell you about my latest journey. Don't worry, it's a safe space. I'll handle all the danger for you. I designed these stories to help you relax, chill anxiety, and go to sleep. Maybe they'll even put a smile on your face, even if it's a sleepy smile. So please, settle in, relax, and prepare to quietly drift off with me to parts known, unknown, and even some places in between. Comfortable? Very well. Let's get underway. Good evening, adventurers. I hope you're doing well. I also hope you're all cozy and settled in because tonight I'm going to tell you about our unexpected delay in leaving Mars and how we dealt with the Sentient Meteor Swarm despite its insistence that we didn't leave the planet. As you remember, we had a lovely time at the Martian Amusement Park and were making last-minute arrangements for our journey back to Earth when the Sentient Meteor Swarm showed up again and appeared a bit more cunning this time and blocked the takeoff of both my ship, the Journeyman, and my son's ship, the John Carter. It adjusted to stop either one of us, so we couldn't do a feint maneuver again to trick it. I mean, fool a Sentient Meteor Swarm once, shame on you. Fool it okay, well, I don't really think that applies. Anyway, I had an idea, and it would require everyone's help, including my assistant Bradley, his girlfriend and our mercenary/security officer Dolores, Tom the futurist, Aaron, our medic, and maybe even Janet, our mission specialist. And I would also require the use of Tom's domed Martian amusement park, along with the help of King Targon and the Martian scientists. And I will tell you all about how it went in a moment. But first, I want to mention again the note about our stories. They are designed for you to drift in and out of, and while yes, I do like to tell you a full story every episode, drifting in and out or falling completely asleep is factored into the equation. You can pick things up anywhere, and that's why I do the story recaps at the beginning, and if you're here, awake, and hanging on every word, just know that I appreciate it. The entire crew appreciates it, and we try to add additional flourishes and flavor in there just for you. So, by all means, enjoy the show any way you wish. It's designed that way. No rules and no pressure, adventurers. I'd also like to nudge you to rate the show with a bunch of stars. I mean, reviews are great too. It's always nice to read pleasant things about what we're doing over here. And this is also important. Don't forget to tell your friends directly about the show and post about it wherever you post about things. The more adventurers, the merrier. Now, before I mention the White Cat Adventurers Club, I want to remind you that we've created a Science and Adventure Helper donation link on the homepage. So you could just go to whitecatentertainment.com and click donate for a one-time donation. Then you can do it whenever you like for whatever you like. But if you do want more, there's the White Cat Adventurers Club. How about early access sometimes, and ad-free listening to all the shows and an exclusive look at my very irregular journal. Science and exploring is expensive, and your support helps make it happen. And for just $5 a month, you can show your support for the show. There are different tiers with different rewards, including an exclusive t-shirt, and you even get all the graphic novels at the $10 tier and above. Please go to patreon.com/whitecatentertainment and enjoy the access your way. All right, let's get back to the story. Mars King Targon once again apologized for the Sentient Meteor Swarm that had apparently gone rogue. It was supposed to be an automated defense system for Mars, but before it was finished, it just became sentient, wandered off on its own and started preventing anyone from landing on the surface of Mars, including Martians. Well, I suppose that did make it automated, but perhaps a little bit too automated. Anyway, I thought I had already dealt with it with our defensive weapon systems aboard the Journeyman, but as they say in fiction, with unusual antagonistic bioforms, that, quote, that just seemed to make it more angry. So we were stuck on the surface of Mars, as I could not use our spacecraft's defensive laser weapon systems from the ground, and couldn't maneuver properly to use them when blasting off due to the Sentient Meteor Swarm's instant and unwanted attention. We would have to get into a hover, and that was something the Sentient Meteor Swarm was just not allowing. Now, while blastoff preparation was already pretty much done, we would have to do some of that again as we got closer to blastoff, but, that would be a moot point if we couldn't get off the planet. So we had to deal with the meteor swarm first. Jillian, our space chef, jokingly asked how many more farewell dinners she would have to cook, and I told her hopefully just one more. No, I know she was kidding, but I wasn't. I don't like going into space on an empty stomach, despite the NASA protocols. Anyway, it was time to deal with the Sentient Meteor Swarm, which, if I'm being honest, was beginning to annoy me. It's one thing to have a problem, but when that problem takes things personally and comes back to be an even larger one, it seems petty and vindictive for a problem, and I've always found that behavior annoying and discourteous. It was like that time I was with Professor Andrews in the Himalayas, and we were tobogganing away from a tribe of Yeti. Professor Andrews had offended them by making an offhanded comment about the Yeti women, and I wasn't very happy with him at that moment. Even with the universal pantomime language, you can be insulting, and honestly, that's not what it's supposed to be used for. Anyway, we were tobogganing down the snowy mountain to safety and had almost reached base camp when it looked like the Yetis were giving up the chase. We were safe, but I would have to go back and smooth things over with the High Yeti in the morning, which was something I didn't really want to do. We slept at base camp, but the base camp posted guards just to be safe, even though I knew the Yetis had let things go for now. They may be quick to anger, but they also had short attention spans, and that worked in our favor. But they also had good long-term memories, which could make things more difficult on a subsequent expedition. So it was a problem that still needed to be resolved. The next morning was bright and sunny, but cold, of course. And like I said before, I didn't really feel like traveling back up to the Yeti Temple to apologize for Professor Andrews' behavior, but as team leader, it was my responsibility. Professor Andrews insisted on coming with me, and I didn't think that was such a good idea, but he was adamant about returning to make things right. I relented and agreed, but should have trusted my instincts. When we finally arrived back at the Yeti Temple, the High Yeti met us with some wariness and still looked a little offended. I apologized on Professor Andrews' behalf, but the High Yeti wanted to hear the apology from Professor Andrews himself. I felt that was reasonable and appropriate, and gave Professor Andrews the snowy floor, as it were. And that's when things took a turn. The Yeti women had all shown up to hear the apology, and Professor Andrews, who, as some people do, seemed to have a dangerous self-sabotage switch that flips on randomly. Before I could intervene, Professor Andrews once again used the universal pantomime language to make a comment about what the Yeti women looked like when all arranged in large groups together, and let me just say it did not go over well. We were too far away from the toboggan this time, and it was only due to my previous relationship with the High Yeti, where I helped him out years ago with a rival group of Yetis squatting in a temple, was I able to get him to listen to reason. Needless to say, I was absolutely furious with Professor Andrews, and this was a good example of a problem that was solved, coming back stronger than before, in a ridiculously petty and vindictive way. After some lengthy negotiations, I was finally able to arrange a penance to make up for the numerous insults generated by Professor Andrews. Unfortunately, as team leader, I had to do the penance as well to appease the female Yetis, the male Yetis, the High Yeti, and indirectly their Yeti god. Now, I knew this was all just for show, since the High Yeti confided to me over some spiked yak milk that there was no Yeti-specific god, but it made the other Yetis feel good about things like being cold all the time, so there was no harm in it. But the High Yeti had traditions and a reputation to uphold, which I understood, so I just went with it. Professor Andrews and I ended up cleaning out the Yeti stables, and I, once again, had to give up all my snacks. And we were in the Himalayas, so that wasn't something I wanted to do. I had packed a lot of chewing gum due to the elevation, and now the Yetis were all blowing bubbles with my gum thanks to Professor Andrews. Not wanting to take any more chances, I also tied one of Professor Andrews' hands behind his back so he couldn't accidentally, or purposefully, use the universal pantomime language to hurl around any more Yeti gender-based insults. Enough was enough. By the end of the day, we were both exhausted, but we had completed the Yeti penance and the stables were clean. On the way back to base camp, Professor Andrews apologized again and confided in me that he just likes attention, and as the class clown in grad school, people always enjoyed his edgy, insightful barbs. I asked him if he was sure about that, and he admitted that he wasn't. He told me he was thinking of starting his second act in a completely different field, and I thought for a second about talking him out of it. The moment quickly passed, and I just nodded enthusiastically in agreement. Thankfully, we had an uneventful return to base camp, and after we were there, I made an excuse about having to check my notes and took my leave of Professor Andrews. I learned years later that Professor Andrews gave up science and adventuring, thankfully, and became an internet influencer doing unboxing videos of men's grooming and hair care products, which, after what he said about the Yeti women, was a bit of an ironic turn. Still, he seems much happier with his career change, and to be honest, I think we all are. But getting back to the problem at hand, I'd come up with a plan, and it was time to set it in motion. We had a sentient meteor swarm, and an angry one at that, to deal with, and we wouldn't be able to go home until we did so. I could also tell both crews were getting a little antsy, so the sooner we dealt with this problem, the sooner we could all go home. And after observing the behavior of the sentient meteor swarm, I realized this would need to be a group effort on multiple fronts for my plan to work. I had Bradley and Dolores gear up with Martian spacesuits once again. Flight Commander Barry, Medic Aaron, and Mission Specialist Janet would be in the Journeyman for a tactical hovering maneuver that I would get to in a moment. Tom, the futurist, would be at the Martian Amusement Park in the Dome control room, and King Targon and the Martian scientists would be standing by on communications, and I would be coordinating the whole thing from the control room just off the Martian throne room. The basis of my plan was that the sentient meteor swarm didn't like rockets, and the more rockets, the more it didn't like it. Luckily, the retro Martian amusement park had a rocket spinner type ride with actual rockets as ride vehicles. Sure, they went around in a circle, but they were still rockets, and probably enough to anger the sentient meteor swarm. Well, there was only one way to find out. However, the swarm needed to detect the amusement rockets, so that's why I needed Tom to retract the amusement park dome. Soon preparations were complete, and I was all ready to put my plan in motion. I was about to give the signal to Tom to lower the dome. But first, let me tell you a little bit about the rides like the Astro Orbiter in Disneyland, as the design was critical to the success of this plan. The Astro Orbiter is a rocket spinner, aerial carousel-type attraction featured at 5 Disneyland-style parks and Walt Disney resorts around the world, except for Tokyo Disneyland. Although each ride may have a slightly different name, all share the same experience of vehicles traveling through space, spinning around a central monument. In most forms of the ride, the use of a joystick, or steering wheel or buttons, etc., enables guests to adjust the height of their individual cars at will, usually within a range of no more than 10 to 15 feet. Now, when the ride cycle comes to completion, any ascended vehicles are automatically lowered for passenger exit and reboarding. It's pretty much the same ride as Dumbo, but for the older kids who don't want to feel embarrassed about riding it. Over the years, with each new iteration of the ride debuting, new designs, thematic schemes, and locations have been implemented to fit with the changing themes of several different Tomorrowlands. Now, not to get too far off onto a tangent, but this wasn't Disneyland's only foray into rocket rides. Interestingly, and I may have mentioned this before, but the rocket rods were a short-lived and, to use a word, well, doomed attraction at Disneyland in California. It was billed as a high-speed thrill attraction located in Tomorrowland and themed around a hypothetical drag race of the future, as well as a futuristic rapid transit system. It ended up resembling, well, neither of those things. The ride opened in May of 1998, utilizing the existing People Mover track and infrastructure as part of the new Tomorrowland refurbishment project. Plagued from its inception with technical problems and mechanical repairs, Rocket Rods was shut down indefinitely for renovations in September of 2000, and ultimately the ride would be fully shut down, as confirmed via an official press release in April of 2001, after 2 years of sporadic and unpredictable operations. While Rocket Rod's queue was replaced with the Toy Story-themed dark ride Buzz Lightyear's Astro Blasters in 2005, the majority of the track infrastructure utilized by both the attraction and its predecessor still sit, visibly derelict, throughout Tomorrowland as of, well, today. Now, here's what happened. In the 1990s, Disneyland wanted to refurbish the Tomorrowland section as part of the Disney Decade started by Michael Eisner. The project was originally called Tomorrowland 2055. Mission to Mars was planned to be replaced by extraterrestrial alien encounter, which was terrifying, by the way, the scariest ride Disney has ever built. But that's another story. Also proposed to join Tomorrowland 2055 was the Timekeeper, which was set to take over Circle Vision 360, another attraction. Plek2's Fantastic Intergalactic Review, a musical stage show, was to take place where America Sings was previously located. Unfortunately, Tomorrowland 2055's plans were canceled following the underwhelming opening figures and negative public reception of Euro Disney, which of course was renamed as Disneyland Paris. So Disneyland's Tomorrowland got a massive budget cut because of the European initial failures. I mean, things definitely turned around at Euro Disney and Disneyland, Disneyland Paris, obviously, but it took a while, and but it was too late for the Tomorrowland 2055 project, that's for sure. So instead of a complete overhaul, Tomorrowland saw some updates to a few of its attractions, and a golden bronze color scheme was given to the once bright all-white land. One of the attractions to be shuttered was the People Mover, which would close on August 21st, 1995. Honestly, this is where the problem started. Well, it usually does start with slashing a budget but expecting the same results. I mean, it's like having half your graduated cylinders removed from your lab. Your experiments will suffer. Anyway, in early 1996, Disneyland announced that Tomorrowland would be remodeled with a variety of new attractions, including Honey, I Shrunk the Audience, Rocket Rods, and Innoventions. Rocket Rods was set to be the area's star attraction. It would take over the former People Mover, with construction beginning in 1997. Rocket Rods opened on May 22, 1998 as part of the new Tomorrowland. The so-called high-speed attraction ran on a renovated People Mover track, and riders entered the attraction through the former Circle Vision 360 building at the front of Tomorrowland. The ride was met with a mixed reception from guests, and that's being polite, as some enjoyed the thrilling acceleration and speed, but others felt it lacked the thrills of a true thrill ride while going too fast to be enjoyable for sightseeing like the People Mover did. Rocket Rods was also operating sporadically due to constant downtime and mechanical problems. Guests would have to wait in line for over 3 hours as there were intermittent closures. Now, I'll be honest, I rode it once. While I am quite an amusement park fan and often enjoy all the experiences, this one, well, it left something to be desired. In fact, Disney could not convince a corporate sponsor to provide funding for a big budget and an entertaining pre-show. At that point, the company was still facing financial issues following the disastrous grand opening of Disneyland Paris in 1992. To save on costs, Disney chose not to modify the original People Mover track with banked turns, which would have aided in higher speeds being possible. Instead, the ride would accelerate on the straight sections of track and then abruptly decelerate as the cars approached a tight, flat-grade turn. The original People Mover was able to traverse these turns smoothly, as it did not travel more than 7 miles an hour. However, also, the original support structure was not designed for the greater speed and weight of the Rocket Rod's ride vehicles, causing the structure to weaken. The car's tires were worn down at a quick rate, resulting in damaged engines. The constant changes of speed in the ride often caused malfunctions. In addition, the computer system would shut the attraction down if it wasn't in the correct position, leading to frequent downtime for breakdowns, evacuations, reboots, and maintenance. On July 6, 1998, just a little over a month after its grand opening, Rocket Rods was closed for refurbishment to address the issues. It was reported to remain closed for 5 weeks, but it ended up staying closed for 3 months before reopening in October of 1998. And it didn't matter, it wasn't enough. On August 29, 2000, Disneyland announced that the Rocket Rods would close again on September 25th for a refurbishment that was to last until the spring of 2001, but no work was ever seen being done on the attraction. On April 27, 2001, the Los Angeles Times and the Orange County Register reported that Rocket Rods would never reopen. Rest in peace, Disney's Rocket Rods. I would love to see the People Mover return, but there seems to be no plans for that happening either. But I digress. Time to get back to our Sentient Meteor Swarm issue. As I said before, I was ready with my plan, and it was time to put it in motion so we could all go home. First, I had Tom retract the dome over the Martian Retro Amusement Park. Once that was complete, I had Bradley and Dolores jump into the rocket spinner ride, each manning their own rocket. Tom started things up and the rockets started rotating. Now, it was important that the ride had riders, so the rockets could ascend and descend like an actual manned rocket. Thankfully, this was enough for the Sentient Meteor Swarm. It noticed the rocket movement immediately, and 10 rockets spinning around together with 2 ascending and descending with visible pilots was too much for it. It immediately ignored the John Carter and the Journeyman grounded rockets and moved towards the amusement park, hovering over the retracted dome to get ready to stop any rocket that got too high off the ground. That was all we needed. We just needed the Sentient Meteor Swarm, well, distracted. And it couldn't split up and guard the Journeyman and the John Carter and prevent the 10 spinning rockets from taking off at the same time, so it opted to stop the 10 rather than the 2. And that was my plan. With the Sentient Meteor Swarm distracted, Flight Commander Barry was able to get our rocket, the Journeyman, into planetary hover mode, and this enabled him to maneuver the rocket into a firing position. Mission Specialist Janet and Aaron, our medic, who had both shown remarkable marksmanship skills at the Martian Amusement Park shooting gallery, manned the manual defensive laser turrets. The Sentient Meteor Swarm was focused on the 10 rotating rocket amusement cars, thinking they were going to all blast off at any moment. It noticed the Journeyman, too late, and Aaron and Janet both opened fire, blasting the swarm. It was reduced in size very quickly, and after a few defensive and evasive action maneuvers, it stopped and hovered between the park and the Journeyman. I ordered Janet and Aaron to stand down, and they waited in a defensive position for the next phase of my plan. You see, the next phase of my plan involved the loss of communication that initially happened when the meteor swarm became sentient in the first place. All that communications technology was still active. The sentient meteor swarm was just ignoring it. Until now. Now it was ready to talk. So King Targon and the Martian scientists were able to re-establish contact with what was left of the sentient meteor swarm. After a little back and forth, and some Martian to meteor negotiating, an agreement was struck. The sentient meteor swarm would touch back down to Mars in their science bay, and the Martian scientists and engineers would effect repairs. This would take some time, but the Martian scientists also agreed to add a few upgrades for propulsion, battery capacity, and solar recharging. The meteor swarm would then take off again, but then go exploring instead of being the defense system for Mars, for which it was originally intended. As long as the meteor swarm agreed not to harass any other spaceships, that was acceptable to King Targon and the Martian Parliament. The meteor swarm agreed to the terms and added that it was beyond harassing spaceships now, and had reached a new level of consciousness filled with curiosity and a need for exploration. King Targon said he understood, as did I, of course, and the agreed-to terms were carried out and put into motion. I was glad it worked out, as I was always happy to see a new explorer start their journey, even if they weren't human and made of meteors. We all met one last time for a final farewell dinner. Jillian and the Martian chefs had gone all out again, to the point where Jillian had made mac and cheese in the shape of rockets and added some miniature meatballs that looked like meteors. It was both impressive and delicious. We retired to the drawing room and had our last briefing. We discussed all the Martian mysteries, now solved, from Tom the Futurist's time ghost, to my son's missing and then found ship, the John Carter, to the sentient meteor swarm, to the so-called Martian ruins, and then, of course, how enjoyable the new Martian amusement park was. Janet added that we shouldn't forget the Mars terraforming agreement, which was significant and would play a role in the evolution of humans as a species. I smiled and said, "We'll see," and Tom the Futurist, who of course was from the future, gave me a wry smile. As eager as we were to get home, we were also sorry to leave Mars. I would also be saying goodbye to my friend Tom, for now, and even my son Patrick, who would be going home with us, but on a different ship, and a ship that was considerably faster than ours. He would be home before us, for sure. And I will tell you all about our journey home with an unexpected stop on the way next time. But before I end this evening's story, I want to talk to you about something. Evolution. Okay, it's a controversial topic. Well, it shouldn't be, but what isn't these days? Anyway, what was very interesting about the sentient meteor swarm is that at first it was a threat, and being sentient, it wanted to be a threat, because it perhaps felt threatened by the rockets invading its personal space. But as it evolved, it realized it didn't have to be what it started out to be anymore. It didn't have to harry any and all ships approaching Mars. It could just leave. Sometimes we ourselves get stuck in unevolved thinking. We do things because we think we have to, or stuck somewhere in a job, or perhaps stuck in a relationship, and we can feel trapped. It doesn't have to be that way, I assure you. When you evolve your thinking, you realize you can just, leave. It's a very freeing thing to come to that realization. And when your thinking evolves, so do you. So sometimes it's better to go away from something than towards something. But of course, when you go away from something, you're headed towards something else, even though you may not quite know what that is yet. Sure, that can make you a little nervous, but it's also very exciting. And that's the other amazing thing about leaving somewhere. It heralds that a new journey is beginning. Safe travels, adventurers. Good night.
The Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood was created, written, and performed by Chris Mancini and produced by White Cat Entertainment. It is a work of fiction. Maybe. Music and sound design by Ron Tansky at rontanskymusic.com. For more info and merchandise, including t-shirts, mugs, and blankets, go to whitecatentertainment.com.